Okay, so here we are again. I'm going to go over to my right monitor. And we're going to just document some of these variables. So canvas adapter, like that. Canada. That's amusing me. Can Ada. So when I type those spellings, it's going to make this happen. So for example, I think I've already shown you this, but for like the global event, if I do that, it corrects me. And that's just my way of knowing that I've already registered this variable name in my documentation, and it already has a very specific name. So whenever we incur this token in source code, we know exactly what it means and what its intention is. So even though it's terse, it has a very specific meaning, and we've taken a lot of time to like document that, which is obviously kind of tedious and crazy, but this is the way I do things. So let's just keep on doing it. So if you type it correctly, we're going to have a check mark that will show up when it's typed. For example, if I do it with the global event object, I type it correctly and do 2 commas. That's not correct, and I know why. So let's go to Control F, and let's search for global event really quick. So sometimes when my shortcuts are loaded, and when my shortcuts are loading, but I'm still working on my shortcuts, some of my shortcuts aren't currently available. So it looks like as I was writing this code, my shortcuts were in the process of reloading. So I just typed this, and I'm like, okay, I'll fix that later. So let's fix that right now. Checktext. And let's search for another example that is already registered. Okay, so editor mode right down here. Editor mode has already been loaded properly. So if I can do an example there with the editor mode. So if we type editor mode as it should occur in my source code, like that, and then we type 2 commas, you get a little check mark right there, right? And that's just to let me know that I've typed it correctly. For example, if we type it like this, edimod, like that, it's just going to expand it to the correct spelling, you know? So obviously this is very meticulous and time-consuming, but, you know, I've written code bases before where I start to forget the specific meaning of a variable. And so I think it's a worthy time investment. But you might just think I'm batshit crazy. You know what? Any combination of those 2 statements could be true or false. Okay, so the canvas adapter and then the user input adapter, UN, Ada, make sure that doesn't exist already. Shouldn't. And then paste line. And let me move that on the screen, and I'll zoom out a little bit. And if we type it correctly, okay. Now we might want some more long-handed versions of this. So user input adapter, and then user input adapter, like that. And then user input adapter. So if we type it like this, we're going to get UN Ada. And then for our canvas input adapter, or actually it's not a canvas input adapter, it's just a canvas adapter, right? Yeah, it's just so hold on. So I'm just going to make a note, no such thing. You want canvas. Yeah. So sometimes when I mistakenly do something like this, it's nice to know what doesn't actually exist. There's no canvas input adapter. There's just an input adapter and then a canvas adapter. So okay, and then for that canvas adapter, right, we'll have canvas adapter Okay, so canvas adapter, and then our user input adapter. So those variables are all set up to be loaded into my shortcuts. And this initial canvas width and height, and then the ini width and the ini height. Let's go take a look in our shortcuts, see if that exists anywhere. Ini width. Nope. Ini height probably does not exist either then. Nope. And we also have map width and map height, which sound like variables I've definitely used before, but we might not have registered them yet. So let's check in our documentation here. Map height, map width, map len. Yeah, we got all that already. So now, but do we have initial canvas width? Oh yeah, so that's kind of a problem. So ini width and ini height are kind of generic. So I kind of see why I had these shorthands mapped to longhands from earlier, because it's the initial width of something. This is the, but what is it the initial width of, right? Because these are both initial widths, but they're different things. So there's we could, I think we're getting a bit too terse. I think, you know, we don't want to get too terse. So, you know, we have been using these variable names that are, you know, clusters of 3 characters separated by an underscore, but this might be a case where there's so much information in these variable names that we really shouldn't get that terse, right? Because we don't really want to go, yeah. So we'll do something like, over here, we're going to do ini width, ini width, ini width, and then ini width, and you know, okay, so I'm still going to allow this generic version. So we'll say ini width like that, baseline, ini width, and baseline. And I'm sure this brings a whole new meaning to thinking about the names of variables, because it's a bit overkill. Okay, so the width and the height as well. The height, height, and then over here, height. Okay, so the height and the width. Now, for initial canvas width and height, I really don't want them that long. So what we'll do is initial canvas width, and then we'll do like, I'm thinking what we can do is initial tile map width, canvas width. If we want to go from general to specific, and what's different between these two, what's the delta between this set of variables and this set of variables? And the difference, or the delta, is the word canvas and the word tile map. And we want to go from general to specific, usually. So what is the order that we should write this in? You know, should it be like initial canvas width like that? Or should it be like, if we want to go completely general to specific, what would it be? Would it be like canvas? Or is canvas the most specific part? Should it be like initial what? Width? Width of what? Width of canvas, right? But now, is that really general to specific? Because I try to keep it more general, more specific, right? General to specific when I'm writing out the variable name. Is this the proper way, though? I guess that's the most specific qualifier, right? Because it could be a canvas, or the specific qualifier could be that it's a tile map. a lot of this is subjective. But the idea is that when I'm looking at a cluster of, when I'm looking at two variables, I want to be able to distinguish the difference by looking at the last section, right? Because it's from general to specific, which usually should mean that the delta, or the difference between those variables, should be at the end. So I'm going to say that I don't really like INI, WID, CAN, and this because even though these are different, usually I'm going to use them more clustered like this in this. And so, right, if we wrote it like this, if we wrote these variables like this, then we would have like INI high canvas like that. And then the difference is in the middle, right? The difference between these two variables is in the middle rather than on the end. And I'd say that's not how we would like to do it. So now that I've thought about that, I know how I want to write it. We'll write it INI can. So like initial canvas. So initial is general. Initial what? Canvas. Then a little bit more specific, the canvas width or the canvas height. So that's the general to specific way I'd like to go with that. So then for here, what we can do is, for these ones where it's not written in the way it should be written, we'll just make like a correction. So initial, and we can like that. And then now we could either correct it or we could just be more blunt about it and be like wrong order. I'm going to say wrong order, use, and then initial like that. Okay, and then over here, same deal. So initial height of a canvas, the initial height of the canvas, and then I'm just going to prompt myself to tell me that I have written this in the wrong order. So initial, so it's the initial, and then it's the canvas, and then it's the height, is the last part. Okay, and then the same thing for this. So it's going to be wrong order, use initial tile map width, and then this one is going to tell me wrong order and to use, oops, wrong order, use initial tile map height. Okay, and then change that a bit, and then INI. Okay, so we got these misspellings of the variable name, and then we have these correct spellings up here, and then we have this initial canvas width and height. So let's just make okay, let's go up here, initial canvas width, and that would be INI can width like that. And then we'll do the same thing for the height. Height, take that. Okay. And then we have the same thing for tile map, so we should make initial tile map width. Okay, and then INI tile map, and then width like that. And then same thing for height as well. I'm going to make a little entry here. And initial tile map width, initial tile map height. Kind of tedious. Okay, and then for these guys, okay, so I have the generic ones. And the last part I need to do is this, and then the tile. So we're gonna have the prompts for when you spell it correctly. Or not the prompts, but just letting you know. Okay, so we're gonna just break that into there. Gonna section things off a little bit. Okay. Initial canvas width, initial okay, yeah. Okay, so we'll duplicate, and actually that should be tile. Okay. Okay. Okay, and then we can take this part here, and we can kind of put that on the end of everything. And then for when it's not spelled quite right, but it's spelled pretty correct, but close, but not quite right, so initial canvas width like that, ini can width like that. We're going to do ini can width. And same thing for all these other sections, right? So ini can high, ini can high, ini can high, paste slide. Okay, then down here, same thing. So ini tile width, ini width like that, and then ini. And, you know, really quick, we can make sure that those all match. Okay, and then one last entry there, and then we can continue with our code. So ini till height, ini. Actually, there's one more thing I want to do. Okay. Actually, not save that. I need to document the meaning of these variables. So down here, I'm going to say, and then right, so initial canvas width. Initial canvas width. Right, so just a little definition there that will let you refresh your memory. Months from now, 6 months from now, you'll come across this very terse variable and you'll be like, what does that mean? And you can look it up and figure out instantly what it means. So canvas height, and then we're going to have to change some of these as well. Initial canvas height. And so this needs to be, okay, initial canvas height. And this is initial canvas width. Okay, so that looks good. Okay, so then we got two more that we want to document. So the initial tile width. And dash means. So when we type the variable name with dash means, it means that I want to know, quick summary, what does this variable mean? And it means initial tile map width. Map size, not tile size. So I've written tile-based code before. I've messed with like Flixel, and one of the problems I had when I was reading the source code was that when you see a variable called tile width, sometimes you're like, okay, is that the width of the tile or is that the width of the tile map? And sometimes it can become very ambiguous. So I want to make sure that when I say tile width, what I mean is the tile map width. When I mean the width of the actual tile, I will use a variable called tile exponent. So it's TILEXP like this. And that's because all of my tile sizes are powers of 2, And so tile exponent of 0 is 2 to the power of 0, which is 1. And then if the tile exponent is 1, it's going to be 2 to the power of 1, which is 2. And then if the tile exponent is 2, it's going to be 2 to the power of 2, right? And so on and so on. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, right? And so I just have very specific meanings for, you know, what means what, so I don't have to think about it, right? Obviously, there's a lot of front loading here, because I gotta, like, do this very meticulously and take a whole bunch of time and spend, like, 20 minutes, but I find it helpful for me. You might not want to do this, because look how slow it can be, but I want to write code that... I want to write a code base that is going to be around in like 10 years. I know that's kind of crazy to say, but you know, I have the goal of writing some nice solid code that is kind of like my version of the retirement wine cellar. You know, it's going to be around. I can work on it for years and years and just keep on building onto it. Which that longevity approach might be kind of just a weird thing to say for code, but you know, that's why I've been writing a lot of C code, you know, writing code in a language that I think is going to be around for a long time. And JavaScript is actually going to be around for a long time. JavaScript is a pretty safe bet. JavaScript and C, right? And one is a very quick to develop in language, and the other one is very low level and slow to develop in, and so those are my top picks, C and JavaScript. Okay, so I think I've documented all of these. I'm going to stop recording, and I'm going to reload my shortcut scripts, and then we'll be back.